Hey there, Dirtbike people. I'm Chuck from TrueTech, and today I'm going to service this 43mm WP open chamber fork. The process is almost exactly the same for any open chamber fork. The WPs are super easy. The Explore forks, also pretty much the same. The only difference is in this procedure that they have, some of them have an adjuster up top. I'm going to do this real time. I'm not going to edit. In large part because I don't have time to edit right now because it's in the middle of springtime and I have tons of stuff to do. So I'm going to service this fork. I'm going to change the seal and the dust seal. I'm going to do it real time so you guys get an accurate idea of what it takes to do this. Open chambers, especially WP open chambers, are my favorite forks to service because they are super fast to do it. Normally I do these in pairs, but just because I don't want to waste your guys' time and you don't need to watch me do this procedure twice, I'm going to do just one. I've already serviced the other one so that all my tools are right here and I don't have to run around on the video. There's the spring. Basically what I did there is I just held this nut and then unscrewed the cap. Very easy. Now, this is a part that a lot of guys try to skip. I'm going to remove this cartridge and I'm going to do that just with my impact. I know it's a little bit out of the shot here, but I'm just going to zip this bottom bolt out. So now the bolt is spinning alongside with the cartridge, so I'm just going to lift up on the cartridge to create a little bit of resistance and then keep hitting it. Now that's loose. I have an oil bucket under here. I'm going to use this as well. I'm just going to jump this up and down a bit. There we go. The bottom, the whole base valve assembly comes out. That looks like this. That's the bottom nut, the adjuster. This is the base valve here. Here's a check valve, and then this is a compression stack down here. I'm going to wash this assembly here. Sorry, my back is turned, but this is real time. This is how I do it. I'm washing this in my Varsol tank. I hit it with a little bit of brake cleaner in order to degrease it. My Varsol has a lot of fork oil in it and other types of oil as well. So I always degrease it with brake cleaner after. Do the same with the spring. This fork is not very dirty inside. This is off of a KTM 625 early adventure bike. Okay, so that's the cartridge. I'm just stroking it to get any residual oil out of there before I put it in here. I'm just washing it. I want to get all that old oil off, even though in this case it wasn't very dirty. Standard procedure. Inside and out. Now, here's the adjuster rod. It can stay in there. That's fine. Most of the time, it does stay in there on open chambers, although you should be aware of it. I'll brake clean inside as well. When I do a basic fork service, I don't take this inner cartridge apart on open chambers because I can clean that substantially enough by doing what I just did. On closed chambers, I take the inner cartridge apart because it's impossible to clean it without doing that. And, of course, to change the oil on a closed chamber. Now, I know any of you watching probably don't have a fork vise, so there are some procedural differences if you use a regular vise. With the regular vise, the primary part is I just clamp down here, and so it is a little bit different, but concepts are the same. Now, this, oh man. These dust seals are super tight. The SKF ones are way better. There we go. During that procedure, you want to be super careful not to damage your fork tubes. Duh. Now the clip. Now this can come apart. Oh, there goes the bushings. That doesn't very often happen. So these bushings are in good shape. This outside part does not matter. The inside part is what matters. That's where the Teflon rides. That's for the outer bushing. The inner bushing, which I'm going to remove right now, it's the opposite. So normally they don't come apart like that. The outer bushing doesn't very often come flying off that way. But it doesn't matter if it does. So this bushing now, see, on this one, the outside is what matters, not the inside. That's why there's two bushings. The fork expands. As it compresses, it contracts like this. This bushing rides against the inner tube, and this bushing rides against the outer tube. I find people get that confused all the time. They see wear on the non-wear, they think they see wear on the non-wearing side of the bushing, the inside or the outside respectively, and then they think their bushings need to be replaced. Once that Teflon starts to wear, once you can see through the Teflon, that's when the bushing needs to be replaced, in my opinion, because there's only a couple of thou of Teflon. So if you're not seeing through that Teflon, your bushing is not worn more than about a thou. In my experience, suspension bushings last, for the average rider, especially for the average woods rider or trail rider, or in this case, adventure rider, bushings tend to last hundreds of hours. And I know that's not a super popular opinion in the suspension world, but if you can't measure the wear, if you can't see the wear, you can't detect the wear in any way, shape, or form, I don't know how you can legitimately say that the bushings are worn and they need replacing. Some guys think that metal particulate embeds itself in those bushings, and that is certainly a plausible theory. It could be, but I have not seen that happen to a significant degree very often. I do see it sometimes, and in that case, sure, replace them. That's fine. But I don't like blanket statements that say, you have to replace your bushings after 40 hours. Sorry, that's stupid. If there's wear, we should be able to detect the wear. Cleaning off the bushings. Okay. Now I told you that I would do this with no cuts, no edits. So this is going to be a little bit awkward. I'm going to move my camera setup because I'm going to polish the tubes in the lathe, or the tube. the inner tube specifically. You see that? Oh yeah, you can see that. Cool. All right. This end, just for safety. Now, the other leg, I do it really slow because the brake caliper bracket over here has taken out my knuckles a couple of times. This side, who cares? I can do it fast. That's that. There. Turn my lathe off. I know you guys probably can't hear it, but the lathe hums. It's probably the capacitor underneath. Okay, now we're going to do this awkward thing again. We're going to turn around. There's my garage door. Ugh. Sorry, but I'm doing this with no edits because I said I would. Here. Oh, you guys were backed up a little more. There we go. A little more wide angle. There we go. Okay. You see? Yeah, okay, we're good. Now, I'm going to wash this off again very thoroughly to make sure that there isn't a bunch of particulate in those cross hatches that I just made. And that polishing, honestly, I could go without it, but I do think that it is helpful for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it does help the seals to seal. There's a bunch of scientific reasons for that I don't understand very well. Hopefully I'll be able to do some podcast type content on that in the future. But also, when I spin that the tubes in the lathe, man, it's amazing how many times I catch defects in the tube because the velocity of the spinning shaft highlights any imperfections in the tube. Man, I catch stuff like that all the time that I wouldn't catch if I didn't spin the tubes in the lathe. Now, seals, I use SKF seals because they're the best. All balls seals are a joke. As Jeff from GP Moto would say, you're just installing a leak if you use all balls or Moose seals, any of those seals that use the TTO brand. Okay, so, sorry, seal bullet. You can also use electrical tape or a stout Ziploc bag or a piece of plastic. Dust seal, then the clip, then the seal. It goes this way. This is the outside. I put a little bit of grease on the inner lip of the seal. Then comes this spacer. Now, I can get rid of my seal bullet. Then the outer bushing, again, you can see that Teflon is just fine inside of there. Inner bushing, perfect. There we go. Now, I always wipe that out just for extra safety. Then I put a little bit of grease in there just to mitigate any friction that's caused by driving in the bushings and the seal. Then this can get dropped in. So inner bushing, outer bushing, and that washer. That washer's job is to protect the seal from the other bushings. I always drive in the bushings separately so that that force doesn't get transferred through the seal. Probably not necessary, especially with SKF seals. Those go in super easy. Then the clip. I use the seal driver to seat the clip. Now these, for some reason on this fork, these 43 mil WPs, the dust seal is super tight in the outer tube. And a final clean. Check this out. SKF seals. Flip it around. Now we're going to install the innards. Now the cartridge can go in, and you got to make sure that it seats in its home down there. If this is down flush, you know you got it. Super important, maybe the most important part for safety of doing all of this, this nut needs to be down. You should have about 1 inch of threads here, and it needs to be, you want to thread it down and tight, like hand tight on this. I'll show you why. Base valve assembly doesn't have to be ridiculously tight. You can torque it if you like, but using an impact is very practical. If you know your impact really well, you know once that nut is, or that bolt is seated. If you don't know your impact really well, then you probably shouldn't do it that way. Now, I'm using 5-weight fork oil. Generally, that is the case. And you want to fill this up right to the top and then let it bubble so that the space between the inner and the outer tube gets filled up. Now, I have this fancy little Racetech, is it Racetech tool or is it Motion Pro? Motion Pro. Is it just me, or is it confusing that both Racetech and Motion Pro use blue? This is Motion Pro. I actually like the Racetech suspension vise a little bit better, although I've gotten very used to this one, so I'm very comfortable with it. So you want to cycle that. Most open chamber forks take about 500 mils. There's still bubbles coming up. Yeah, you can hear that bubbling. Right up to the top again. Oh yeah. Sometimes it takes a few strokes and a few minutes for the valve assembly to start sucking in the air and exchanging it for fluid. But you can usually hear it, you can usually feel it, and then you can definitely see the oil level go down. You can see I keep topping it back up. We're getting there. Okay, the stroke is now smooth. There's still a couple of bubbles. There we go, bubbles are done. All right, now I have an oil level tool. It might look fancy. It's just a big syringe and a little set screw thing to set the level. I'm setting it at 120 mils on these forks. Racetech is a great resource for this. You can check what weight fork oil you most likely need and an oil height or capacity as well. Now I'm just expelling the excess oil back into my container here. There. Now the spring, and you don't need this fancy tool. It just makes life a lot easier. Now that nut. So again, this nut is tight on that shaft. These are the spacers that set the preload. I'm not messing with that. I'm just servicing them. Now, we're threading this fork cap back down onto the damper rod, and if this stuffer, or this nut, is not tightened onto that damper rod, the damper rod runs the risk, you run the risk of just turning the damper rod and this nut coming up to meet the cap when it's only on by a thread or so. And if that happens, your forks can actually come apart, and I've seen that happen while riding. It's very dangerous. So the fork cap needs to be threaded all the way down onto the damper rod. I see so much misinformation that where guys are talking about how you set your preload by setting the height of the fork cap on the damper rod. Absolutely false and dangerous. A massive misunderstanding of what's happening and what this is designed to do. Fork cap back on. So that's finished, and I always, sorry, I know you can't see this. I'm just hitting it with some brake clean just to degrease it at the very end, because there's usually a bit of fork oil and stuff on it. I do use quite a bit of brake cleaner, and once I have my new shop, that will hopefully change, because I'm going to have a sink right next to my suspension bench. It's actually integrated. That's all in the works and all on the drawings. Okay, these forks are ready to go back on the bike. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please let the algorithm know. If you want to see more content like this, go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell. And if you want to see what I'm doing on a more day-to-day basis, you can find that content on Instagram. See ya.